Hello again. For those who have not been here before, my name is Horst Hörtner, and I'm directing the Ars Electronica Futurelab. And this is the second block of the Ars Electronica Futurelab afternoon sessions. This is the intro to the Work of the Future panel. And what we have heard so far is, and I'd like you to rethink also what has happened already on stage, make some notes maybe of what will happen on stage about that as well with our inspirational speakers, because at the end this entire discussion is on you, or I should rather say on us all together, thinking about what we have heard so far, using what we have heard, I would say using it as a map and a compass, and try to generate a path for us in the future concerning the work of the future, concerning on how would we generate our income on a planet B, ideally, utilizing the map and the compass that we have been given, and try to come up with the right questions. The point is really, what are the right questions concerning the work of the future? This special session intends to discuss different perspectives towards how do we imagine the existential base of our income on planet B. What are the right questions to be asked? Can we save resources spent on workplaces or work environments, and at the same time reduce the inequalities that we have heard? Gender equality, again, how can we bring that down to our daily work? This fishbowl session addresses these topics based on an intense interaction with you. So it's all about you helping us to discuss this topic. We will start with a short list of people, personalities with very diverse backgrounds. And I would like actually to introduce to you Gianpaolo Barozzi. Gianpaolo Barozzi, I hand over the microphone to you. Thank you very much. Gianpaolo Barozzi leads the Cisco People Experience Innovation Team and the Intelligent Human Network Project. His team focuses on revealing the most relevant signals in change in the world of work, exploring their impact and prototyping innovative experience and solutions to ensure Cisco continues to lead the way to the future of work, or to the work of the future. With the tool WebEx, Cisco has developed a pioneer position for remote work on Earth. And I would like to ask you a question on, when you think back on what we have heard so far, I mean, how is the work of the future changing in a large corporation like Cisco? Where are the fundamentals that are in question?
Yes, if you don't mind being Italian, I would rather stand and not
of course,
touch anybody else with waving. So first of all, buongiorno. Thank you, Horst, for being here. So let me start with, I'm going to be one of the bad guys of the previous session, the one concentrating on growth and, wanting capitalism to be better, but still existing. So glad to have more about it later in our conversation. But let me start with a very quick experiment, okay? Now, concentrate a bit. Think about one person that you know very well, that is an adult, either, relatives or one of your parents, my aunt, Mary, my father, and without thinking too much, in your mind, introduce him or her to me. My Aunt Mary is, or my father is, or. So think a bit how you would introduce this person. Okay, now think about of introducing yourself to me. Right? In my case, I'm Gianpaolo, think about it. Easily, what comes to your mind? Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure that for both description, you had somehow a profession, a work, something that they did. My aunt is a doctor. He is working in a factory. I am a student. I am a researcher. In my case, I am an HR director, which means that work is not only and simply a way to get a living, to ensure my income, but has been defining who we are. It's part of our identity. And I think that if one of these people or you have a specific passion that is aligned with what you do, you used it in your definition. And so work is what we do for a living, is helping defining my identity, and if we're lucky, it's actually aligning and fulfilling my aspiration, my goals, my wishes. So today we're here, at the Planet B Ars Electronica Festival to talk about work, because we want also to talk about a specific element of sustainability that often is a bit forgotten, which is human sustainability. If we're not able to create human sustainability, very unlikely we will be able to create all the changes that we expect and make them last. Because at the end of the day, we are the ones that are going to put in place this sustainability. And if you think about human sustainability, for what we just said, work is a fundamental enabler. We can't think about women and men sustainability without thinking what they do, not only for a living, but to fulfill themselves. And so giving the perspective of industries right now, there is a lot of conversation around work. There is a lot of conversation from a very technical perspective, few that are broad. This is why I started in helping us think what work is. And traditionally, the largest providers of work, companies, corporation, industry, and governments, are now thinking about this nature of work. Some of them are redesigning work. Not only the way in which they structure it and they pay for it, but also the way in which they design it to deliver it to their people. Plus, during the pandemic, there was another major revolution. I like to say that the main casualty created by COVID-19 has been Frederick Taylor. Frederick Taylor is the theorist of the work in the way we structure it up to 2019. Then, overnight, more or less, we had an entire economy that started to work at home. And so this mix between work is a place where I go, the office, and work is all around me, and the mix of my life and work becomes a single thing, has started another major rethinking about work. The entire you only live once movement, for example. If tonight you're joining us at the 8K space, we're going to show you how hybrid work and work shows up at Cisco. These are actually the visualization done by the Futurelab team of the connection between our people, 1,500 throughout the globe. You have here on the left-hand side the US, and on the opposite side, the eastern part of our globe, which means that now work is really messy. This is why a lot of fundamental themes are now coming into the conversation. Fairness, justice, equity, security, social security, inclusion, the ability to fully participate, and finally, purpose. There are companies, ours is one of that have a chief purpose officer. And what does this organization do? It actually thinks about how the company collective purpose is pushing for sustainability and a better world, but also is thinking about how the company is designing work for our people so that work is actually fulfilling their own purpose. So, to close, 2 messages and 2 questions for all of us. First one is, let's think about human sustainability and not only the other dimension, because it's fundamental. Purpose is a fundamental player into our future. And the question for all of us is, what is our own purpose? And how the things that we're doing are actually aligning and fulfilling it. Because at the end of the day, only fulfilling our purpose, we will be able to change the world as we want. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You said one thing in particular that picks me up, that makes me think of that the industrial Marxian triangle of capital, work, and soil, as he called it, might be in question already, actually also in the corporation world, which seems to be promising. Ria Lu. Ria Lu has been in the game development industry for more than 15 years now, aside from being active in the Game Developers Association of the Philippines. She also runs a studio in Manila. She is a past president of the Soroptimists International Club of, I already lost it, Parañaque, thank you. A socio-civic organization advocating the betterment of the lives of women in particular, and girls. A core member of the Creative Content Creator Association of the Philippines, and the 2015 awardee at the Go Negosyo Filipina Entrepreneurship Award. She's a successful Philippine business leader who has been supporting ILO's, International Labour Organization's, Women in STEM program for years now. Warm welcome to Ria Lu.
Thank you.
Ria, we're really interested to learn from you, in particular about the Philippines, and how do they cope with the so-called digital transformation, and especially in the field of inequality of gender. Could you give us an insight on that?
Sure. If you don't mind, I'll just stay here so that I can see fellow panelists as well as the audience. So, well, the Philippines isn't really a very digitally advanced country in the first place. I remember back in 2019, I was vacationing in Japan. I was in the mountains, with wild boars and everything. But I was on 4G while my team was sharing 1 Mbps in the central business district of Manila. So that's kind of how slow our internet is. It's better now, but there are still a lot of places that are like that. And I'm not even just talking about the provinces. I mean, even the big cities, like I said, the central business district, there are portions that have that kind of really, really slow internet. But aside from internet speeds, the Philippines also kind of has trouble accepting digital in the past. Like, for example, contracts. For the longest time, or even now actually, contracts have to be signed by pen and paper. They don't accept digital. Most courts don't accept digital contracts. When you're in a bank, when you're opening a digital bank account, you're still required to submit physical copies of notarized secretary certificates in triplicate. So it's kind of weird, that we're so resistant to digital. E-commerce as well. For the longest time, e-commerce couldn't work in the Philippines, primarily because most people in the Philippines are unbanked. They don't have bank accounts. I mean, good luck expecting them to have credit cards, right? So how do you do e-commerce, right? So that's kind of the original landscape of the Philippines. But then the pandemic happened. So with the pandemic happening, businesses closed, banks were open only every other week. Most people were really in a difficult spot because lack of work, or for those people who did have work, they had trouble getting paid because, like I said, banks were closed most of the time. So the government really pushed for digital transformation back in 2020. And it was hard because the concept was so abstract for the Filipinos during that time. I mean, what do you mean, right? Digital transformation. So if I email you my form, instead of going to you physically, is that considered digital transformation already? So it's kind of that. We were really trying to figure it out as we went along. So definitely there were industries that had a really hard time adjusting to that digital transformation. But there were also groups that did really well with this digital transformation. Particularly, the group that did really well were the women of the Philippines. In 2020 data from our Department of Trade showed that 84% of internet-related businesses are owned by women, which is, well, we're learning now that that actually isn't normal in the rest of the world, but we kind of thought that was kind of normal. But I suppose, let me backtrack a little bit and tell you a little bit of the gender landscape in the Philippines. So first of all, we never really thought that women couldn't do anything. In the first place, in our language, in the Filipino language, pronouns have no gender. So that's why it's kind of a little hard for us when we're learning European languages. It's like, really? Tables are female? But things like those. But we don't have gender in our language. That's the first thing. Our first woman president was in the 1980s, and there wasn't really any fanfare about her being a woman. Nobody thought that she couldn't become a president just because she's a woman. So that's kind of like how Filipinos are, except we were colonized by 3 different nations, all of which were patriarchal societies. So I think the gender equality that's happening in the country right now is sort of like more of a perceptual thing. This is like, we think that this is how we should be perceived as. So because of that, we have this weird, fake patriarchy going on, wherein when you look at the surface, yes, you have like most of the CEOs of multinational companies are men. Yeah, and if you ask, people would say, no, it's the men who are supposed to be the heads of the household. Okay, all right. But then if you peel the surface and look a little deeper, the situation changes. Like, yes, true, CEOs of multinational corporations are mostly guys, but then 70% of businesses in the Philippines are owned by women. So that's kind of how the Philippines looks like. But that's inside our country. Once you step out and start doing things internationally, of course, we face the same inequalities as maybe the rest of the world. Now, let's go back to digital transformation. So definitely there's a lot of things that didn't work with digital transformation, but I'll talk about 2 things that really worked, especially in gender, with the lens of gender equality. First was remote work. So with everything shutting down, suddenly, we needed to find a way to work in a place where we aren't in. So like, for example, our provinces, we can't work there. There's nothing there. So we had to like get out somehow. If you look at this picture over here, this is a picture I took of one of our beaches back in February. I was workationing there earlier this year. This is like paradise, right? But normally, people who work here, the locals who work here, only earn around 200 to 300 euros a month. All of a sudden, with this digital transformation that allowed people to go online and find work, suddenly we can work in places like this, earning more than what we normally did, working less time than we normally did. So I don't know if you've heard of the type of work called virtual assistant. It's basically like an assistant, but virtually. So it's like, I can do everything for you except make your coffee. There's a lot of that type of work that's going on in places like this. We only need a computer with internet, and then we can actually do this type of work, servicing people from outside of the Philippines. Second, aside from remote work, the second thing that sort of grew in the pandemic was e-commerce. So for the longest time, nobody wanted e-commerce, right? But then, with the pandemic, there's really nothing you could do. Good thing there was a service that came out back home wherein you could now have a digital wallet just using your mobile phone. And there are more mobile phones in the Philippines than there are Filipinos. So the adoption happened quite quickly. And when we started doing e-commerce, it grew. Everybody started buying online. There were crazes that were happening inside in the Philippines at the start of the pandemic. They were fun little crazes. We had these sweet purple buns. Everybody at the start of the pandemic was selling sweet purple buns online, and people bought. So, in conclusion, with this whole digital transformation, it really helped open up opportunities for a lot of people in the Philippines, especially the women. And what part of digital transformation that helped us was really working remotely, servicing other countries and not just our own, and also entrepreneurship played a really big part of it, like I said, with the e-commerce and the digital stores. And so, yeah, that's basically what helped in the sense of digital transformation when we're looking at gender in the Philippines.
Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you very much. How could the Philippines teach the rest of the world how to increase gender equality? In Europe, this is totally different. The numbers are below 50 and less. 84, you said, 84%. It's, wow, fantastic. We need to learn from you. The next round would be Marcus. Marcus Neustetter is an artist from Johannesburg, earned his undergraduate and master's degree in fine arts from the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa. As artistic director, facilitator, researcher, and strategist to various creative industries and areas, he finds himself building opportunities and networks for co-production projects beyond the personal artistic practice into seeking entrepreneurial and alternatively cultural ecosystems in the creative sector. His 20-year collaboration with Stephen Hobbs in the Trinity Session is currently addressing the need for job creation, self-employment, and locally relevant community engagement in South Africa. In Europe, Trinity Session is a partner of the recently appointed European Institute of Innovation and Technology, EIT, Culture and Creativity, as well as the Ars Electronica together. Marcus is an adjunct professor with the Nelson Mandela University and currently moves between his studios in Johannesburg and Vienna. A warm welcome to Marcus.
I will stand. I will turn this way to make sure we're included. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. It's quite nice to hear the different perspectives on work of the future. I specifically I was told I can use only one slide, so I specifically chose this slide because Tulisi Lebindo, who you see on the screen there, who's a performer and a collaborator that I work a lot with in Johannesburg, is actually in a space of a studio of mine where I've built Planet B out of objects that are found in the trash and everywhere else, and we created this environment. And why I thought I'd present this and why I'd like to address this in relation to the question of work for the future, work of the future, is because essentially this person who's so different to me, also South African, from a different background, culturally, she's a performer, I don't know what I am, I draw, I do things. And artistically we have different languages, verbally we have different languages, and yet we operate in the same circles when we're producing work in very different but similar contexts. And what I mean with that is we are both products of our own creative inequalities within the context of South Africa. 35%, I believe, is the unemployment rate at the moment in South Africa. It's not good. The focus of the government is on job creation, job creation, job creation. Unfortunately, most of the job creation goes to bricklayers, as opposed to thinkers and innovators and transformers. That is really what we need. So our cue and our question around how do we empower the artists to become the carriers of the jobs of the future is to say what is the essential tasks that they have and the essential abilities that they have that we can push beyond the basic skill sets. So we can all learn how to craft something if we work hard enough, but how do you take it to the next level? And what we realized is the failure of education system in South Africa, and I'd like to add there the failure of universities' education systems in South Africa, is that as an artist you come out kind of naive. You come and you learn how to make a picture, but actually the buyers of that picture is some international art market and not your local consumers, because there's not enough art buying in that world. Similarly with performers, you enter the theater world and that's about as far as it goes. So you have to create your own audience. You have to become your own manager, you have to become your own promoter, you have to become your own digital assistant, and you start to realize that actually the cultural producer within the context of a third world environment such as South Africa, it has become the know-it-all, the person that is able to tap into all the different systems. And suddenly as a freelancer, you get jobs all over the place because you're able to project manage, you're able to take your tasks on. So all the young developing artists that we work with at the Trinity Session have actually been through a process of self-development and self-employment and self-empowerment just merely because they have to survive, which comes back to the question of balance between the passion and the survival. And what we're noticing is that over the last years, pre-pandemic, let's add that first, there was an incredible shift towards artists actually realizing that there's a job for him beyond the process of just fitting into the art market. And so I do truly believe that there's something about an engagement process that the artists can offer in shaping something around what it means to be working in the future. I'll give you an example. As a group of artists, we get asked by the city of Johannesburg to put artworks in a public space. So we enter, we realize we're not going to put the artworks up, we're actually going to engage with the community. We've done this for 20 years, we know by now, you put something up, it gets stolen, you have to make sure that everyone talks to each other and then put something up, and then hopefully it'll survive. And so the strategy suddenly becomes that we talk, we engage, we ask questions, we invite you to come and be part of the artists. We interconnect with people, and suddenly we realize the community of practice is actually our skill. Our skill as artists is not to make the artwork that then stands on the square, because no one really cares about that thing. Again, if it's made of metal, it's more valuable on the recycle dump for money than it is as art. So you have to really think about what that means. And suddenly the city has recognized that as artists, we become ideal mediators between the vision that they have, the need that the community wants, and the artistic vision that we have. And so suddenly there's a completely new job description that didn't exist before. Before it was clipboard researchers that would go and ask people, do you like the color red? Yes, good. Do you like now suddenly there's an engagement process where people are telling their stories, content is being thrown out, the city has to listen, and we mediate. And suddenly the artist becomes this empowered freelance person that has created his or her own job. And for me, that is something to really think about around creating a freelance world where your ability comes from the context, speaks to you, and actually new jobs are created. Similarly, audience development. I love being in Europe because you go to an exhibition or you come to the festival and there are queues standing and there are people waiting to experience culture. You know, what a wonderful thing. You know, in a context where art is not that important, and I would even argue the notion of art, the way we celebrate it in Europe, is an imported and maybe even imposed notion on a lot of the African continent. Very problematic statement, but I do want to argue that one day. With that imposition, comes a lack of interest in the conventions of what we experience as art. So if I come out of a place that makes art, or I sit in my studio and I make pretty pictures, or I make sculptures, I'm expecting people to appreciate them. What we all learn very soon in that context is because there are no queues, because there are no galleries knocking on our doors, and because there's no support system, we have to educate our own audience. New job opportunity. We've developed very quickly a group of artists that become almost, again, the voice piece towards developing new audiences. And what's exciting about that is we're not developing audiences for consuming art, but actually for a certain lifestyle and appreciation of what's around. And I think this is where the intersection again happens between art and ecology, for example, where we're talking about a completely new engagement with a future vision, where the artistic role becomes much more about a dialogue with other disciplines. And I mean, we're standing in the heart of one of these spaces as we speak. I mean, the Futurelab does exactly that. And that interface again, offers completely new job opportunities and roles where you as an advocate for what you're doing are actually creating an audience that eventually consume what you do. And Tuli and I, for example, did several performances in the past, and now when we collaborate, we also understand each other's artistic language, but we also appreciate the economic exchange that happens around us with whatever performance we're doing. And so this relationship with another artist and the collaborative nature that we have across disciplines, across cultural boundaries, etc., even across language boundaries, starts to again become another vehicle for really integrated exchanges that could be very valuable in the workplace. And again, I think that the examples mentioned around equality, etc., are quite obvious. So for me, in conclusion, is really the process of the artistic practice, not necessarily the outcome, but focusing on that empowerment process of self-empowerment is really something that we need to capitalize on towards really thinking about who am I as someone that's going to work in the future? How do I find that balance between the passion and the survival, but how can I draw more and more on those alternative skills that we don't necessarily label as something important just because we studied one thing? How can we harness those more effectively? And we've got some wonderful case studies in South Africa, and I'm very proud that we're on that journey. But it's a long journey ahead, especially now with all the changes that have happened. We're seeing that there's this incredible crossovers into completely new disciplines and sectors that are opening new doors again. And so the push towards job creation and trying to break down that unemployment rate is for me quite a strange one, because we don't want more people just laying bricks. We want people to actually create their own audience, build their own opportunities, and become those freelancers that can tap into different contexts and spaces. So Tuli's got the long view, as you can see. She's holding the thing the wrong way around, and I think that's exactly what we are. We're artists with a long view, and we're trying to take the time and the research and the prototyping of what we're doing to try and reach that goal at the end, which is a balanced future working environment. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Passion versus survival. That leads actually perfectly to our next panelist, Viktoria Čaić. Viktoria Čaić from Germany studied physics and biomedical engineering in Austria. Although she successfully finished her master's studies and got the opportunity to work on a research team at the university, she decided to follow her childhood dream of a therapeutical work with horses and children. She has always been interested in political and social topics. The concept of unconditional basic income made her enthusiastic about the possibilities she saw in changing the way of living. After she tried to further the idea in a political party, she joined the association of Generation Grundeinkommen, Generation Universal Income. At the moment, she is even in the process of co-founding a new basic income initiative. Very welcome to this panel. As a self-employed educator and active member of this association for unconditional basic income, how is universal income discussed on a global debate internationally?
Yeah, maybe before I answer your question, I will shortly summarize what I mean when I speak of unconditional basic income. I think the most important notion is that the income that is necessary for life is decoupled from paid work. So without having to prove any need or looking for a job, every inhabitant of a country gets a fixed income every month that is high enough to cover all necessary expenses and to be able to participate in social life. Another important aspect is that an additional income, for example, from a job, does not reduce this basic income. And of course, I also don't see this income as a substitute for other governmental tasks such as education or infrastructure or healthcare, but as a supplement. So how could this solve some global problems? Because it's helicopter money, in fact. Yeah, I think there are a lot of problems in the world, and all of them are surely worth solving. But I also think that now we have some very big problems that are affecting the whole world, and because of them, it's especially worth thinking about how a universal basic income could change or could affect these challenges. And what first come to my mind are, of course, two big problems that that are really closely related. Of course, I mean climate change and capitalism. And I think it's no big secret that the turbo capitalism, especially in the industrialized nation, has led to this now noticeable global warming, which are primarily people in the global south have to bear. And it's also no big secret that we as humanity must now work all together on how to deal with this climate change and to prevent the worst from happening. But at the same time, however, it seems quite inappropriate if the main contributors to climate change, so the nations which have grown rich through capitalism, are now depriving the benefits on other countries, because now that they have used up all resources, it's time to save resources. And I think that's where basic income come into change, because there are certain funding models that facilitate resource solving by, for example, making it cheaper to repair some broken things like shoes or electric devices instead of throwing them away to buy new ones. And in this sense, the universal basic income could not only lead to elimination of poverty, but also to the generation of a new wealth where you don't have to resort on a destructive capitalism. And over the last years, there have been a lot of pilot projects all over the world, and all of them showed the same results. No one used this free money they get to just laze around or invest it in some blind consumption, but the people instead used it to improve their children's health care or medical care, or to let them go to school for a longer time. It has been shown that they are less likely to commit crimes, and they even got healthier in a physical and psychological way. And I think these benefits speak for themselves, and I think to summarize my talk, what this decoupling from paid work and necessary subsistence can lead to what the world needs now, and that are people which are free from existential hardship and who can spend their time to educate themselves, to get involved politically and socially, to pursue a fulfilling and meaningful work, and to take responsibility for themselves, for their society, and for the whole planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beck. Thank you. May I also ask an additional question, which is like, what is the financial backing of unconditional income? How would that be financed?
Yeah, there are different models of funding, but the one that I prefer is that consumption is taxed, because the taxation of work is not a very sustainable model, because due to digitalization, automatization, and also a always older population, there will be less and less people who work, so the taxation of consumption is much more sustainable, and it has the effect that people will try to consume less and less, and, for example, repair old things instead of buying new one, because buying something would be more expensive than repair it or do it by themselves. And also they have a lot of time when they don't have to work for their living to do some things by themselves, to repair something or to work for themselves. And like this, you can reduce consumption, you can also make a variable tax for different things, depending how good they are for the environment, for the planet. And they are very good models, even calculated by this university, and it has been shown that it could be funded by a consummation tax.
Thank you very much for this insight. And I think, I'm not sure how you think about and how, I mean, I have questions endlessly, especially on that topic. But before we start the questioning round and open up the discussion, I really would like to thank you all for this contribution, especially because, and that is, I think, very important, we've tried in programming something like that to have all the different kind of representatives from the different fields of work that we can group together in 4 people represented here on stage. And in addition, we tried to group different cultural backgrounds here on stage. We strongly believe at the Ars Electronica Futurelab that yes, industry is making a lot or causing a lot of challenges, but the challenges that are caused, or the fact that so many people are living on the work for the industries, gives a huge leverage. And it's very, very often being discussed in, especially when it comes to sustainability, outside or offside the industry. And I'm so very happy that we have representatives here from the industry, and talking to you, Gianpaolo, and want to say thank you also, because that shows that, first of all, Cisco, or first of all, industry is part of our society. And we need to have this open discussion with all the society. Even if we all agree on some goal, whatever, we are still missing out the rest of the 8 million. So it's so important to find people with open enough to join this type of discussions. Thank you very much for that. Okay, the chairs need to become free, because now we are addressing you as the general audience to join in the discussion and to give perspectives, to raise questions. Tell us about your experiences in work. Tell us about your expectations, maybe, that you would have, or simply the utopia for the future of work. There are some rules on that fishbowl discussion format that we have. Of course, not to be mentioned, mutually respectful tone, of course, for sure. There are the hot seats. This is the place where we invite you to come, take place and talk with the microphone that the speakers have used as well, and talk to the audience. Participate in the conversation about, everybody is open and allowed, of course, to rejoin, to strengthen his position or her position, and asking further questions. Rejoin the stage as often as you want. In order how to get here is, there are not that many people left anyway, but just come out here to the front row and join from the front row whenever a chair, one of the hot seats, is available and free for you. And, yes, of course, just in case, there is kind of a time limit to it as well. So if somebody starts talking endlessly, I have somewhere, I think I have here, yes, beautifully prepared, colorful cards. Football players would, or football fans would immediately understand what that means. That's just like breaking down, and there is of course also the stopping card in case it's really getting too long. But you can stay on the chair and really also initiate a discussion, just not for too long. The 3 rules: only talk if you're sitting on the hot seat, come sit in the front row and gather a chair as soon when it's possible or free, and please feel free to voluntarily free the chair again for the potential next one. Starting with the questions. There have been a lot of keywords mentioned today. So we were diving through just in this panel so many different aspects on remote work as one consequence of the pandemic. Almost, one would say. I wouldn't call it a consequence. It was there for way longer, but used in this very, very wide acceptance, not only by the individuals, but also by the employing companies. They all of a sudden accepted homework because they had to. Some say the biggest driver for digital transformation so far was COVID-19. We have heard about different perspectives from an artistic practice from Africa, noting this perspective also on a freelance work and how a freelance work could build up and create communities, create identities and create ideas. We have heard from Ria talking about this really fascinating number of 84% of owners, women owners of internet-related businesses at the Philippines. I really would like to learn about how you did that. It's unbelievable. We've heard also before, and that's a very strong discussion we can have here on degrowth. I mean, you remember when all the panelists, and especially the Ernst Ulrich Weizsäcker, were positioning out that it's since 50 years, he's telling this, growth isn't an option anymore. And it isn't an option since, not an option for only the status today, it's not an option since 50 years actually anymore. How can we support in our work, on our daily experience, in our daily work, how can we try to at least, if not degrowth, but help sustainable development, sustainable production? Of course, we need to produce something, we need to work on something that somebody out there is buying or paying money for. But nevertheless, we have quite a leverage. We can decide on many levels, or some of us at least, on many levels, how we produce, how we spend the time, the work in offices or at home. Do we turn off the lights, etc., etc.? The question is really, how could we now, as we have heard, it's very frustrating, another aspect, it's very frustrating to hear that running on street, getting political activism out there is just not paying back because there is no fundamental wide reaction on that. If you have perspectives on that, please come and join the stage. As I said at the beginning, utilize what you have heard as a map and a compass, and let's try to find a pathway to the ideal work of the future. Somebody who would like to join? Please. Just feel free, there's 5 free seats, and the microphone's back there. Anna, great, thank you. Just sit down and start.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Alexei Stablev, and I'm head of the project Immaterial Future. Basically, I came here because the subject that has been discussed is very relative to what we are doing, and I wanted to see if there were any like-minded people here, and that is a miraculous chance to promote what we are thinking about, because this is exactly what you have asked about. So I'm a musician by profession. I play cello since decades at a relatively high professional level in a string quartet, in chamber orchestra all over the world, and so on. But since like 10 years, I instantly turned my career into the venture investments field, and due to many reasons, out of curiosity mostly, and also because I understood that there is a certain limit for me as a creator to be really to develop further, because I either am in a very narrow circle of those who are demanded and welcome everywhere, or I'm an independent creator who cannot go beyond the frames and so on. So all this together, sorry for bothering you with my story, brought me to the project which we are developing now. That came from from these two starting points, right? So there are a lot of people who want to create, who see this meaning of their lives in creating something, and what they really miss, they miss models for making this sustainable, for their products to be demanded and so on. Now let's go from the other side and see all other billions of people who work in marketing departments of the corporations, dedicating their life to proceed to convince people to buy things they don't need. And this is something that people really sacrifice their lives for decades, which they really hate and which frustrates them deeply. What then? What can we do as a society to combine these two things? So people want to create, but they have to promote these growth, say, and consumption and so on. That's how we came to the idea of shifting the general paradigm of growth or degrowth, or whatever you call it, towards the immaterial production and consumption. Of course, culture is not the only field of these immaterial, where these immaterial things could be produced and consumed, but this is very important things, as long as you do not consider culture as something that entertains you and something that you can put aside in first turn, and then, okay, thank you very much for your symphony, I'll go and buy a new car, new clothes, and so on. No, if the potential result, potential achievement could be considered by a lot of people in the field of cultural consumption, let's imagine that would be another level of economics, and then people who want to create would be probably recognized as important, socially recognized, I mean, as important members of the society. And this is what we do. I'm about to finish, to introduce and to give my answer. So just if some of you will want to go on with this subject, so on Saturday we are having here at Ars Electronica several panels, and what we did basically, we asked if there is anybody in the world who is thinking about that, who is doing something, who is trying to bring this venture capital, I beg my pardon for using these words, because this is totally contrast to everything I said before, but we tried to understand if this approach of starting the edge engine with the funding from the venture capital is actually possible in case there is somebody who wants to build these sustainable models for culture. So this is what we're exploring. This is what we started doing, starting the Caltech Accelerator, which we started in January in Vienna this year, and which we already had a first batch on Saturday at 1 o'clock in this same building. We are going to present the results of our startups. So this is the setup, and I'm very glad to answer any questions, or which is even better to listen to some answers. Do you think it's possible or not?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Anna Oelsch, and I was really amazed by the four speakers earlier. Like, you had so much to say, and there was especially one thing that I want to quote from Maria. She was saying that in the Philippines they had troubles accepting the digital transformation because the concept was just so abstract to them in the beginning. And then I was wondering, if I think of work of the future, how far can I go? Like, where is the limit of my imagination? What am I used to? What concepts have I been introduced to? And where is my personal limit? And then I was thinking, yeah, they learn from other people all over the world. And I think that is exactly what we need to do as well. That is what globalization and also the technology coming now and being more and more effective allows us to do. And if I talk or imagine work of the future, I'm thinking of identity as well, as Gianpaolo said, work as identity, maybe as a hobby that I do because I love it. I just love what I do. And all the rest is like on the side. And hoping that we could appreciate everyone doing their part would be a really crucial thing for me as well, because at home, for example, I do housework, not because I like it, but because it has to be done. And not a typical housewife type, but still, I contribute, right, so that it works. And I think that would also maybe work for us as society, maybe even globally. Now I'm starting to really dream, but that is what I think that we actually need as humanity.
Yeah, hello. Thank you. I am Andreas from Graz. I am not a member of the Future Caring Society of Professionals, and I don't want to make a promotion of my projects. I think it's a little bit difficult. I have heard here a lot what I would call, sorry, my English is not so in practice in the moment, an utopian causes socialism for privileged people, because this is all what we are speaking about. The main question is how to share the surplus productivity which we got and which we will get through digitalization of society and industry. Because when you see now Amazon, yes, and all these other big players, they are very rich people and millions of people who are working nearly as digital slaves, the people who are working in the post office and all other things like this. And the truth is, I think, China is getting bigger, and this is far away from decreasing, from degrowth. They are increasing, they are strong, they are investing. And if you come to Austria, if you see the security guards outside working here, they have 60-hour regular job working limit per week and 12 hours per day. And this has not been before 5 years ago. So in reality, for most of the people worldwide, the conditions of their daily struggle for life is getting worse. And so I don't see the utopia, I see maybe the fight for the rights against big companies. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much on that.
I think maybe my comment is not, it's in a way related to what was just said, because I mean, talking about a personal project again, but just as an example, I'm a sociologist and I work a lot with architects, and I have now, I work on one project where we sort of say redesign the headquarters of a big media company. And what sort of say puzzles me currently is we think a lot about work and what it means, and what is very puzzling in a way is that sort of say this company, they were struggling because the people didn't want to go to the office, so to say, after Corona anymore, and there was this kind of home office situation. And then they started to ask themselves why, and they thought, okay, do we maybe need a kind of more fancy office space? Do we need more shared office? Do we need a more digital office whatsoever? And we said then, we don't know the answer, but if you sort of say want to work with us, what we would do is we would like to go to each department in your company and just talk to people what they do and how they perceive the current space they're in. And what was for me very fascinating was that sort of say by doing that and then sort of say by making designs out of it and talking to the CEOs, what we started was a discussion on the quality of work. And what we realized is that it was oftentimes then about things that sort of say, it is sort of say, the whole project became then sort of say very much down to earth. It was not about fancy ideas of offices anymore. It was about where are spaces where people can do quiet work and do focused work. Where are sort of say, where do I get a nice meal from and stuff like that. And I have the feeling it sounds a little bit boring, but I have the feeling when we also talk about the future of work, what we should not forget is this question of how do we want to work and under which kind of conditions. Because I have the feeling, so to say, oftentimes it can be also dangerous. I mean, of course, we need visionary and big concepts, but on the other hand, I think we should not forget this kind of micro level of what are very concrete conditions of work, because I have the feeling at least approaching things from that perspective can also change our way of thinking about what the future of work means. And yeah, this is just one statement from my personal work.
Thank you, Bernhard.
Yeah, I would also like to add some of my insight of my personal work. But thanks for the very good inputs, and this showed how diverse all these problems are, or all these different needs we have about the future of the work. Yeah, I'm Sigrid Bürstmer, and I'm teaching at the University of Applied Sciences in Graz at the Institute of Design and Communication. And what I see or experienced from our graduates and also from our students, they really care a lot of social issues. So they do a lot of collaborations. They working in interdisciplinary teams. They do the co-working. They have co-working spaces, of course. They using open source tools. They really share their ideas, and I think that's a really, yeah, from me a really good and optimistic approach where how they deal with their work. And also when it comes to their thesis, so which topics they choose for their bachelor or for their master thesis, I realized they now also working a lot with the topic new work, or one of my students is just now finding out what we discussed already, how many female students we have, and we have a lot more female students. But then when we take a look at the business side, where are all these female design students? Yeah, and I'm very proud of all my students dealing with all these good topics, and yeah, which makes me optimistic.
Yeah, I want to add, I think that the future of work implies community building, because just as the recent report of Club of Rome, for example, also said, the biggest threat is not climate change or other threats. One of the biggest threats is us ourselves, the collapse of our society, that we don't stick together. And I think a lot of work in the future needs to be put in to fix this. So I see 3 types of work. One is for survival, one is for individual purpose, and the third one is for common purpose. So that's it.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. I agree with you, and I think the future is in the education in the young generation, because if we educate in a way to the children where they know they can make a difference right now while they're learning. They're not just learning for making a test and having a good degree and waiting until the end, but actually they can really participate now because they are the ones who really care the most about the future. And so I'm sitting here for a reason with my bag here, Plastic Free Boy. The Plastic Free Boy is sitting up, he's 16 now. He's sitting up there in a workshop talking about plastic and bioplastic and how we can go into circular economy. But I'm from Linz, but I live in Australia. And for the last 6 years, I've been working with him since he's 11 in front of the camera. So I love to work. I love to work what I do, and that makes films about the things that I care about, and they're usually social and environmental issues. And my son, he grew up, he wanted to be an actor, and he was very caring about turtles in the ocean, and he saw turtles being put back in the ocean because they had ingested plastic. He saw what was happening. He told the kids in school, and they said, why, they're just stupid for eating plastic. So he said to me, and he said, what can I say so people care? And I asked him, would you like to tell the story of the turtles? So we made a film with him in front of the camera, and in Australia we have a really good name in the whole nation. And we made a film with him in front of the camera called Plastic Alarm, and it's gone to 1 million students in Australia and overseas, and now we have a new one called Plan B, full of solutions to protect coral reefs, for the last 2 years. And because we think we don't have a planet B, we have only a planet A, so we have to have a plan B for planet A, and that is to really get the kids to understand they are the future, and they can do it right now. It doesn't matter if you're 3 to 5 year old, you can actually tell their parents not to use single-use coffee cups or single-use bottles. And so we are here, we're actually showing a film, Plan B, here in the one of the places. We haven't even seen it yet. But it's basically, we're collecting solutions, and I think that kids, once they understand while they're in school what the problems are and what they can work on to create the solutions, that part of the passion while they're learning can become their future work. So they've been practicing it already while they're growing. They can change, and they can evolve with each other if we give them the chance to connect them digitally with each other, which thanks to COVID is happening better. And then they will create their future out of their passion, which they have already investigated during the learning process. And I think that is collaboration is number one, of course, and the environment is the main focus. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you all for the very nice and interesting talks. And I kind of want to bring it back to one of the first things that you said, is that when you describe a person, often they relate part of who they are to what they do as a job. And I'm from the Netherlands. I've also lived a time in America. And I often see that this is indeed the case, that people sort of attach their self-identity to what they do for work. And also very much in America, sort of the mentality is you work until you die. People don't take vacations. They're kind of trapped in their work. So what I also see around in my own experience, I'm now entering the working field myself, and a lot of the young people kind of want to steer away from this, and they find it kind of a shame that they have to sort of give up one of their most valuable resources, which is your time, to just become part of this system where you work this 40-hour job. And I think that is one of the best opportunities, I think, now that the pandemic has given, is that you see a lot of initiatives that try to experiment with the 30-hour work week, what you see in the Scandinavian countries, or the flexibility of home office, that people can do remote working, indeed how you were working at the beach. And I think this gives the opportunity more to people that they can align sort of their self-interests and with their passion for what they do, because it's very lovely if you love what you do for work, but I think for a lot of people this is not the case, and that's why we should keep experimenting with different types of work systems so that people can more and more align their own self-interest and with also the way that they can work best, I'd say.
I would like to answer to this colleague who mentioned that for a lot of people there's not such a shining future of the work because they are in very bad jobs like this Amazon delivery services. And I think that's true, and that's because I think we have to free people from the need of work, because it will be a very strong emancipation if you don't have to work, and if Amazon is going to you and tell you to do some really bad work, then you can say no, because you don't have to survive. And if you can say no, they have to think about something to make you do what they want. So maybe they have to pay you enough, or they have to make some other offers that will bring you to the point that you say, okay, I will do it. But you don't have to work for your existence. And then when you can say no, no one can just do something like Amazon do and just grow bigger and bigger and become richer and richer, and you are the little one who has all the bad things of it. And I think that's one of the biggest benefit of an unconditional basic income, because you can say no, and that's the biggest emancipation of workers that you can imagine. And like this, you can avoid something bad what is now happening. And if we want another future of the work, and future which is fulfilling, and I think people will not stop working because work is part of identity. So they will continue, but they will not continue with everything, but just with something which is okay for both sides, which is okay for Amazon and okay for the delivery service.
So, a couple of comments. Let me do a general one. I definitely agree that there is an element of capitalism that has gone wild. And personally, I am absolutely welcoming unions. Although I work in Italy, I do respond to US. I welcome unions in technology. As an Italian, let me tell you, I would welcome my union to live in this world instead of being still in the 19th century. But that's a very personal perspective, because exactly like you said, the people at Amazon needs to be supported. The people that are doing awful jobs in our own cities needs to be supported. So that this is absolutely a given. And when I was talking about work, I'm talking about the work you are referring to, which is a fulfilling one that is a certain number of hours, the one that you decide, and that allows you to get somewhere, right? And where you want to go. I cannot resist telling you that I have already subscribed a couple of friends to the movement of the liberation of marketing people in corporation from the guy before. The very last one is talking about work and cities, work and spaces. One element that we should consider, and I think your generation has a great opportunity, is how work is going to be embedded into the place. There is a nice book called The Placemakers, right? COVID has dramatically changed work, and work has dramatically impacted our cities. right? Not by chance, all mayors were saying, come back to the office, because you have an amount of economy connected to the fact that you go to the office, you have a drink in the morning, you go to the restaurants for lunch, you do stuff, right? So one thing to add to this discussion to me is how work and spaces are going to change. My recommendation is go and seek for Venywhere. Is a Venice project started by the University of Venice, Ca' Foscari. And the idea is exactly that. It's saying, can we redesign a city that is a museum today to become the city for the people that can work from anywhere? Instead of your beaches, a Campiello in Venezia. And they're actually starting doing that. And what they do is they are not providing co-working spaces that are the fake corporate office, like WeWork, where you create a new corporate office for everybody, but they're actually using empty spaces of real ventures. So you can work in a room close to an artisan, in a foundation, in a museum, in a research center. And so the way in which work can be redesigned in a way that you can choose where to go and choose with whom to work to a certain perspective is very fascinating. So that's another dimension that you should consider.
I just wanted to make a quick share with you, because I just realized how disturbing this picture message was. There is a totally screwed up ecosystem. The powerful elites that have the option have chosen their exit strategy, and we're not aware of what's going on because we are highly entertained by virtual realities or distracted by them. So, powerful picture message. Yeah, and what I wanted to share with you was a quote that disturbed me quite similarly, and it is from David Graeber, as some of you might know, and he said, "The concept of work-life balance is bullshit. It's always life." So maybe we should take 10 steps back and ask ourselves, what is work actually? What's wrong with the assumption, is Michael working already again, or is he still at home with the kids? Maybe everything we do for ourselves and for others can be considered work. A radical concept. Taking that into account, it would be a very ambitious art project not to work. That's I want to leave you with.
Thank you very much. Talking about art projects, there's also one radical thought that we had at the laboratory not that long ago, talking about the success of the concept of art and science, how art and science has contributed into the communication with arts and with scientists about arts and about scientists to a way broader audience than it ever would have met within the arts or within the science on the first place. A very, very successful concept on that scale. And by this discussion today, that reminded me to a potentially power that would be embedded in the same combination, but thinking about art and governance. How would we be able to express and talk to a way broader audience as artists, contributing to simply understanding the necessities that are given in the consequences of governance. And I think that would be, it's just like one thought picked up from you more or less, because that is, as I imagine your piece being a sound piece for some sense, but nevertheless, Thank you for that contribution. I also would like to, before Marcus comes to word, would like to ask you for a new topic or a new idea that already has been touched by so many already. When we are in the age of choosing our work or choosing our career, we very often think about what I am interested in. What is the right thing, for me out there? And I really think that we need also in education press a button that extends this notion on what is interesting for me to what the world needs. So if we covering both, I'm not saying just thinking about what the world needs, but covering both kind of directions would automatically lead not only to your interests and talents for generating income, it would lead to this perspective of generating and bringing in your talents into generating income, but for the better means of the world as well. So from this, it's a cultural change on that level, individual-centered perspective towards work. Maybe we should rethink as corporates as well as individuals, the bosses in HR departments as well as the workers, thinking about from the individual-centered perspective to a planet-centered perspective, what the world could benefit from this next step. But I would like to hand over to Marcus now. Anyone else? And of course, yes, please, if you have to share something with us, please join the stage.
I had the urge to respond, or not respond, but share a little anecdote, and I think you already incorporated that. I was trying to understand the measurability of success of what we're calling work at the moment. On the one hand, it's the paid contribution, and then it's the, as you were mentioning, the part that we contribute to society at large and build community, and then there's the passion. I had an unfortunate or fortunate experience where I wanted to work with a group of street sweepers in Johannesburg, the people that come out at night to clean the streets, that get very poorly paid by government, but nevertheless they've got a job and they do their job. That's the attitude of the government, unfortunately. And I wanted them to do an art project with me at night where we were going to sweep a whole of light bulbs down the street and kind of talk about illuminating the streets, and fun project. And I was told no by the higher powers of the city. And when I asked why, they said no, because we must make sure that the people sweeping the street only think of the next square meter. Because if they think of the next square meter, they'll just keep moving forward. We must not let them think beyond that, because thinking beyond that means they will slowly start to rise. Because it's a really depressing moment when you actually have someone in front of you telling you this. Luckily, that person is no longer in power. But nevertheless, the reality is that is what we're facing. We're not facing this group of people who believe in this change. We're facing people that believe in that mentality. And so I, as an artist, and as a human, constantly am confronted in my practice with that conditioned thinking. And my big question right now that's come up, and what I want to ask, I don't have an answer, is how to tackle that individual that says no and puts a line down because they're trying to control the masses that are still feeding their system because that's the way they know how to operate. And so I don't yet have an answer on how to, I mean, I've got strategies, you go around the back of them, but the reality is that there's no measure of success for that person to understand yet that they're going to do their job better because they're thinking differently about their space, or that they will have more job satisfaction. So that sense of measurability and accountability somehow by the person that's in power is running through my mind. So I just want to share that little anecdote and the frustration of trying to make projects in these spaces that try to create place through community belief that is being stopped by narrow-mindedness.
I wanted to address the comment a while ago about what if you're stuck in a job that you don't like. Now, this isn't really true for everybody, but I find that a lot of times this is true, and this is me speaking from a country that is really primarily in poverty. So I understand what you mean when you say it's like you're feeling stuck in a certain job. But one of the things that we've noticed, especially with since I work with developing industries in the Philippines, is that a big portion of the time, again, not all the time, there are times where you really have no control over that, but a big part of the time, the stuckness is a perspective issue. It's not really true. Again, not for all situations, but a lot of them are. Because we think that, probably because we feel bad, we think that those are the only options that we have. But a lot of times that we actually have more options of work than we think. Again, with the whole world moving into digital and being borderless now, that's something that I think we could look into. The world isn't that small. So, for example, like the example that I gave you a while ago about the beach, Boracay, people there could have been stuck with 200 euros a month, and that's it, because that's all the province could give. But if you look beyond that, and you'd realize that there are more opportunities than that there are actually things out there. Given that, sometimes also when the opportunities aren't there, I'd like you to try to consider, what if you started something yourself? In the Philippines, I know and a while ago, we've been talking a lot about like large corporations. There's that, but there's also small businesses. I'm a little surprised that the small and medium-sized enterprise, we don't talk a lot about that. But that's actually, I think, a very powerful entity to have. You can think of it this way. We always look at the big corporations and think giants, hard to defeat, hard to go against. But if it's something that you really want to go against, if that's what you really want to do, you don't need another giant all the time. You can go with, let's say, a swarm of something. It's like if you have 1,000 small and medium enterprises doing the same, having the same values that you want to push. Like, for example, there's a movement in the Philippines right now of social enterprises, which are basically profit companies, but they're doing this primarily for social costs. Like, for example, products that use non-harmful chemicals, not chemicals, or natural things. And there are actually a rise of a lot of these small and medium enterprises who believe that products should be done that way and not the products that are being produced by the big corporations. Now, if you have enough of those small and medium enterprises doing that, you can actually create the change. You don't need one giant, you can have a lot of little ones. And the interesting thing about having that type of setup is that they're more difficult to kill. Giants are one entity. You kill it, it's dead, But a swarm is kind of difficult to kill. You destroy one company, the movement isn't dead, right? So that's just something that, I kind of want to impart. Maybe it's something that you can think about.
Thank you very much.
I really would like to give testimonial to you, what you just said. We have social enterprise in Australia as well. And also my son, Alian, the plastic-free boy, when he goes to schools and presents his solutions, his one is speaking, but we also made a cup, for example, a reusable cup. We have been seeing kids starting their own enterprises and starting to make money. My son is getting really paid really well because he's a great public speaker. And for example, at the Asia Pacific City Summit and Mayors Forum in the whole Asian region. But also he was asked by a global advertising agency to speak at the biggest marketing conference in Australasia, which is Mumbrella 360. And I said, what would you like him to say? And he said, you should talk to this. He's talking to the CEOs of big companies. And he was asked to tell them what he's doing, why he's doing it, what his audience is, and what they can do to help him. Because we know plastic is a big problem for many countries. And so my son, he can change the demand. He can change the understanding and the consciousness of the kids to know that if we don't buy single-use plastic bottles, we will harm Pepsi and Coca-Cola. And so, for example, SodaStream contacted us and wanted my son to be a spokesperson for their new VR set, and making SodaStream a solution for Pepsi. But SodaStream just sold out for billions of dollars to Pepsi. So when I got the contract of what it would mean, it said you cannot say anything that would harm SodaStream. So I asked them what would that mean, what could he not or could he not say? So they said he cannot talk about microplastic. Meaning, I think from a company point of view, we want to sell products, we want to make profit. From a young person point of view, we want to have a future without plastic problem in our stomach, in everywhere. So we can help sell the solution, but we have to work together. So from a young person perspective, like you said, we can have many, we can create a solution and sell the solution, or we can tell everybody, don't buy the problem. So I agree with you that, and he is 16 years old and he is a professional. He can make money from public speaking and share his films in schools. So, and also he's working with Philippine with groups in universities already. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Come on, guys. There are still some few which haven't been on stage yet. I think what we can come up to summarize slowly what we have seen or spoken about today as well. If there's really no one coming back from that row. Closing is really difficult because so many things have been touched here, and one that sticks also to my mind was Andreas mentioning that we need not only visions, we also need to speak out requests, and I think that is a very, very important notion on how to move that forward. That leads, of course, to political activism. That leads, of course, to going out on the street and continue what many of you, what Christa Sommerer, she was just like in the last panel talking as well, is addressing to. We can't stop doing what we do. And very nicely in the morning described by Marcus Neustetter with your plastic ball full of water, shoveling uphill as an art piece, a continuous art piece. And I may quote Marcus Neustetter for this end of this panel, don't stop. Thanks a lot.